Hi, and a very warm welcome, everyone. Welcome to this Fronius webinar. The topic for today is a perfect PV dimensioning, and it is a topic that was also very interesting for me to prepare. I studied economics, so you could say I'm not a technician. I didn't come from a technical background, and we economists, we have a favor for statistics and for numbers and for comparisons we can do between different statistics. And this is actually what I did in this webinar and what I will show you. So I used the Solar.creator, the Fronius planning tool, and I calculated through many different PV systems, and I tried to find out which system has the best autarky rates, which one is best in self-sufficiency, and which one has the shortest amortization period. My name is Max, and I have the honor to guide you through this webinar today. I'm part of the Solar training team, and as always, I'm not alone. Behind the camera is my colleague Tony, and Tony will also, as always, oh, sorry, I see there is a writing mistake. That's not Robert, it's Tony. Tony's behind the camera, will take care of your questions. If you have any, please feel free to use the chat function, and he will answer while I am speaking. So what is the plan for today? The starting point is, we said, it's a detached house with an annual electricity consumption of 7,500 kilowatt hours. And this house is to be equipped with a PV system. And let's assume this is the house of your customer, and your customer addresses you with the following questions. How large should this PV system be? Should it be 5 kilowatt peak, 10 or 15? Which one is more efficient? He also asks which extension will bring the most savings, so better to equip an ohm pilot or a watt pilot or a storage system, which brings most efficiency. And also in total, if you combine those systems, what is this combination actually worth? So if you say you have a storage system, an ohm pilot, a watt pilot, so a PV controlled EV charging, in the end, to what extent does it pay off? First of all, we will take a look in the Solar.creator. I will show you the calculation I did, and it also gives you some insight into this tool. And for those of you who maybe are not familiar with it or haven't used it so far, you get also a feeling for what you could use it for. And yeah, and then we will go into the economist thing. We will compare, I will show you my calculations, and we can compare a 5 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt, 15 kilowatt PV system and the numbers that come with it. So let's go into the Solar.creator. You see my screen now, and you see the project overview of the Solar.creator. You see below many different PV systems I entered and which we'll compare, and I will show you the full system. So 10 kilowatt peak. This is in German, but I guess you can put the strings together. So it's with storage system, watt pilot, and ohm pilot. A couple of months ago, the Solar.creator got an update and is now more appealing. I don't know if you have taken a look. You see also here in the front overview, you see self-sufficiency rate, self-consumption rate. You can add different statuses to the different projects, whether it's already accepted, postponed, or rejected. You can add some notes. Yeah, and we will go into edit and just go quickly through the steps that I entered. So first of all, if you're opening a project, then you ask to enter the project location. I've chosen the location of Wels, Fronius Wels, so right here, or right next to us. You can automatically you get the solar irradiance rates for this particular location. You can also add an increase or decrease rate. You can choose grid parameters, also feed-in limit. We click on next and we get to the load profile. Here in the load profile, you can use various already prepared profiles. I've chosen household with heat pump. As we said, this is a household with an annual power consumption of 7,500 kilowatt hours a year. You can choose from many others. For example, Monday to Friday evening peak, Saturday, Sunday midday peak, including an electric boiler, Monday to Sunday, always the same peaks, and so on and so forth. There are many different profiles you can choose from. And what you could also do is add or import a load profile. So go to your Solar web account, click on reports, and then get out a report in an Excel file with, for example, the consumption data of a particular house, of your house, or maybe a house of your customer. And then you can enter this load profile into the Solar.creator, and then you're working with real numbers. The profiles you see here, they are also real numbers, but probably if you take some PV system that is close to you, then it's even more accurate. We click on next and we enter the data for hot water and heating. We say this is a 3-people household. This building is a rather new one, was built between 2015 and has a low heating demand connected to it. And we say this is an air heat pump, as it is really common nowadays. Then we get to the load profile of the e-mobility. So you can choose here an EV manufacturer. I choose Volkswagen, an EV model. You see almost all EV manufacturers that are available right now. You can choose from them here and choose also a model. And then below here, you enter the charging profile. In this case, I said this profile here is working full-time without home office. So as you can see, the vehicle is not in the house, cannot be charged between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. And this holds true for all days during the week and on the weekend. On Saturday, it's also moved a bit. On Sunday, it's at home for charging. And we say every day the car is running 60 kilometers in total. If you want to choose, to change this profile, then you can just click here on the hours respectively. And if it's turning green, then this means the car is available for charging in this period. We click on next and we get to visual roof planning. There you can enter the Google Maps app, Google Maps map, and visualize the PV system on the respective roof. I will not do that for now. We just go to the PV arrays. So PV array 1, we say this is a 10 kilowatt peak system. We have 5.25 kilowatt peak west orientation, and the other one east orientation. The other way around, east and west orientation. So it's in total 10 kilowatt peak, east-west orientation, and it's symmetric. You can choose from many different manufacturers, same as with cars and the models. What has also been updated is that there is a favorite section. So if you're always using the same modules, then you can save them here in the favorite category, and you don't have to look for them every time. I click on next, and there you can choose if those two PV arrays, if they're connected with each other, so if they're connected to the same inverter or not. If I'm not setting this tick here, then this means we need 2 inverters. We say 1 inverter is totally fine. Next, then we get recommendations for which inverters to choose. Only one is possible in this case, the Simod Gen 2410 Plus. And then we start the calculation and we get different results, so different ways for stringing the system. Result 1, you see here 1 string on PV1 and 1 string PV2. Result number 2 would be a bit different. There we would have 3 strings for PV1 and 1 string for PV2. We choose the recommended one and stay with result 1. And I again click on next. There you can enter the cable losses. The cable calculator is also a new feature. If you click here, then you can enter the cable length of the DC side and of the AC side, and this calculation gets even more accurate. Or if you don't want to get into that much detail, then you just enter here a rough number of the power losses in percent. Then we choose a battery. In our case, we take the Fronius Reserva, the largest one we can choose, so which has 15.8 kilowatt hours of storage. Backup components, in our case, not relevant. A smart meter, a charging box. We take the new WattPilot Flex that is on the market since a very short time, and we connect it to EV1. So in this case, we only have one vehicle we entered. We connect to this WattPilot. Next, heating on pilot 3-phase is clear. And then for revenues, this is also very important. We enter the feed-in tariff and then the cost tariff. So we calculate with a feed-in tariff of 8 cents per kilowatt hour. You could also enter here subsidies, one-time subsidies or ongoing, so that keep coming month after month. We don't do that, and then we enter the electricity costs. Here we calculate with 0.33 euros per kilowatt hour of costs. Total system costs, I will go into that in a moment. And then we click on next, and we end up at the final report. This report can be sent to our customer as well. It can be downloaded, and there you see a summary of all the things we just entered. So the project location, you see the parameters we entered, you see simulation of self-consumption rate, of self-sufficiency rate, amortization period, return on investment, in this case is almost 7 years, and some graphics that are also nice to watch for our customers. So that in this amortization diagram, you see again, return on investment is reached after 7 years. And if you're calculating on 30 years time, then this PV system brings a revenue of more than 70,000 euros. We also see some simulations on hot water supply. As you can see in this simulation, it says between April and August, 100% of hot water supply is done with PV energy. And what is also added, or what has been added, the descriptions of the various components. I think this is appealing to the customer, nice to watch. So the battery that is here, the on-pilot, WattPilot, and also the inverter. And you find the single line diagram. This might be for you installers, might be important. That is also included in this report. All right, so good. So far, so good. This is what I entered in the Solar.creator. We now go back to my presentation, and I will show you the various comparisons I did. You should see my presentation now. So again, the questions I tried to address. How large should a PV system be? So if we are saying this is a household with a yearly consumption of 7,500 kilowatt hours, what is the best PV size? Is it 5 kilowatt peak, 10 kilowatt peak, or 10 kilowatt or 15 kilowatt peak? Which extension? What pays off the most? WattPilot, on-pilot, storage, and in total, how much savings are possible with full sector coupling? For the first question, I calculated with 3 PV sizes. I assumed a price of 1,000 euros per kilowatt. So a 5 kilowatt peak system is then 5,000 euros, 10 kilowatt peak 10,000 euros, 15 kilowatt peak 15,000. If you're calculating with 8 cents for feeding in per kilowatt hour, then we're going to return on investment after 4 years for the smallest PV system, 5 years for the 10 kilowatt peak system, and 15 years for the 7 kilowatt peak system. If we say there is no feed in, then the order stays the same, but we see a longer period of amortization. So after 5 years return on investment for the smallest PV system and 12 years for the 15 kilowatt peak system. Here you see the revenue after 30 years in brackets. So or the other way around, this number here, this is the return after 30 years if we're calculating with 8 cents per kilowatt hour feed-in tariff. In brackets, you see the revenue after 30 years if there is no feeding. So if there's no revenue for feeding in. I think very logical. So after 30 years with 8 cent feed-in tariff, we see that the largest PV system pays off the most. You get 50,000 euros after 30 years. However, if we take a look at the numbers, if there is no feeding in, no feed-in revenue, then you see that the largest system doesn't pay off at all. You see the revenue after 30 years is even smaller than for the small system. So a 5 kilowatt peak system brings you almost 25,000 euros if there is no feeding in. Autarky rates, I think this is logical. The larger the system, the more you can supply yourself. So it's almost 50% with the 15 kilowatt peak system, and self-consumption rate is always highest with the smallest one. So how large should the PV system be? It depends. If there is if feeding in is possible, and if it is likely that this will continue for 20, 30 years, then also larger systems are paying off. If this is not likely, then it's probably better to stay with the smaller system. Secondly, I tried to find out which extension will bring the most savings. In the left column, you see a naked 10 kilowatt peak system, and then you see a 10 kilowatt peak system with battery, with on-pilot, and with watt pilot. The price I calculated with is again 1,000 euros per kilowatt hour. For the 15 kilowatt hour battery, I calculated with costs of 8,000 euros. For on-pilot, 1,000 euros 250, and 1,000 euros additional for watt pilot. Return on investment doesn't come with a surprise. If feeding in is possible, then amortization period is the lowest for on-pilot and the watt pilot system. If there is no feed-in possible, then picture stays the same, only the amortization period takes a bit longer. So the return on investment is reached after 7 years. Revenue after 30 years with feeding in, there we see that the battery definitely pays off. You see that the revenue is here highest with over 60,000 euros, and also autarky rate is the highest among all systems. So what are the takeaways from the calculations here? If people are ready to invest in the beginning, so if they can afford to put more on the table, then it definitely pays off to go for a battery. The amortization period is a bit longer, but in the end, after 20, 30 years, you just get more revenue out of it. If people are small on budget, then still they might think of getting an on-pilot. On-pilot is usually a rather cheap solution for bringing up self-consumption rate. And you see here that the amortization period either stays the same compared to the naked system, or it even gets a bit lower, depending if feeding in is possible or not. If an electric vehicle is in the house, no question about it, then it definitely pays off to get PV control charging and to get a watt pilot. If no electric vehicle is in the house, then of course this is also an investment people have to calculate through. And let's get to the last question. What increase in self-consumption is possible in total? For that case, I compared 10 kilowatt peak system without anything, with a battery, with battery and watt pilot. Excuse me for the German that enters here the presentation. Speicher is storage system. So 10 kilowatt peak plus storage system plus watt pilot. Or we see here full sector coupling, 10 kilowatt peak plus storage system plus watt pilot plus on pilot. Price calculation stays the same, 1,000 euros per kilowatt peak. For the battery, 8,000 euros, watt pilot 1,000 euros, and the on pilot additional 1,000 euros, 250. Return on investment with 8-cent feed-in tariff is still the lowest with the naked PV system after 5 years. However, if there is no feeding in possible, then nothing can beat the full sector coupled system. And also, if you take a look at the revenue after 30 years, so with 8-cent feed-in tariff, then you can also see that the full equipped system just pays off the most. We see here a revenue of over 70,000 euros, while the naked system is almost half of it, so only 43,000 euros. Auto key rate doesn't come as a surprise as well. Here, just the battery system pays off the most. Why is not the fully equipped system here in front? Because watt pilot and storage system are cannibalizing each other a bit. So then it could happen that the electric vehicle is charged and still some energy is needed for satisfying the household demands. And in that case, auto key rate gets a bit down. However, on the other hand, you see it here with the self-consumption rate. We see a self-consumption rate of 80% with the fully sector coupled system. So 80% of all the produced energy then is used by the household. What is the takeaway from those calculations? Same as before. If people are ready to pay more now to get have a bigger investment now, definitely go for the sector coupled system. Use as much energy as possible from your own roof. Then amortization period will be similar to the naked system or even lower, depending if there is if you get something for feeding in or not. And without a question, revenue after 30 years is the highest with the fully equipped system. Let me draw some conclusions of my calculations. So first of all, although large systems pay for themselves later, they yield more overall. It's logical, the smaller the system, the shorter the payback period, the larger the system, the higher the long-term yield. So as I said, again, if people are ready to invest, go for the larger system. Sector coupling brings more than a system extension. If you compare a 10 kilowatt peak system with storage and watt pilot, then it costs only 5,000 euros more than a 15 kilowatt peak system, but it has the same amortization period and the higher total yield. So if people are thinking, okay, should I do more modules on the roof or should I get an on pilot and a watt pilot or a storage system, then definitely go for the extension and not for more modules on the roof. And last but not least, sector coupling certainly pays off. I think this is the most important message we can get out of those calculations. We have higher investment costs in the beginning, but far greater self-sufficiency rates and similar system profitability. And what comes with it is greater independence from fee increases and feed-in bans. I don't know what it is like in your countries. In Austria, we are the feed-in limits, they are going gradually down. In some regions, feeding in is not possible at all. In other regions, they can feed in a little bit, but in hardly any regions, there are no limits. And the direction we are going is clear. Feeding in is becoming less and less and less and less. And it might even happen that at one point, people have to pay if they want to feed in. So every kilowatt hour that people can use of their own energy, they should do it. We come to an end of this webinar. I hope it was interesting for you. I hope you got some information that you can use. As always, the recording will be forwarded in the next days. If you like this webinar and you are hungry for more, then you know where to find the registration. Just go on our website. There you can register for other webinars, also for trainings. And if you're interested, you can also visit us here in Austria. What is always a good idea is to check our YouTube channel. You see here the QR code you can scan, and then you directly get to it. There you also find recordings of webinars and explanation videos you might find useful. Other than that, I thank you a lot for your attention and for joining. I wish you a wonderful weekend and good success with all the Fronius products. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time in a webinar. Bye-bye.